Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Shash Hegde, and I'll be talking about decision management today. A vast majority of my content is borrowed from these sources. James Taylor's blog has also been a really important resource for collecting this information. Here's a rough agenda of what I'll be talking about. I'll be going through an overview of what's decision management, talk about why BI and analytics are typically not enough, give you some sample use cases, and if you would hang around at the end, I'm going to share some important questions, 5 or 6 questions that you can ask yourself to determine if decision management makes sense for you. And then we can talk a little bit about next steps as well. So let's ask ourselves a hypothetical question here, a bit of a thought experiment really. What controls your business? To answer this question, it completely depends on the lens you wear. If you're a finance person, you probably talk about money. If you're a legal person, you might talk about regulation and compliance. A technology person obviously may have a technology slant towards this. A common answer, would be people, process, and technology. I view people, process, and technology as the 3 legs of a stool which support decisions. Ultimately, it's all about decisions which control a business. What are the people, after all, doing? They are making decisions which shapes the direction in which a business goes. The regulatory environment or the legal framework within which a business operates is also decisions that somebody made at some point to kind of guide the direction in which your business goes. So doesn't it make a lot of sense to have a systematic approach to handling decisions that take place in an enterprise? And that's largely what decision management is about. I started to explore this space and I ran into a quote from Edward Deming. Edward Deming was a statistician who is responsible for the total quality movement, and he did a lot of work with Toyota and other Japanese automobile manufacturers to raise the quality of their output and their yield, etc. It's interesting that he mentions the ultimate purpose of collecting data is to provide a basis for action or a recommendation for action. Most statisticians that I talk to are focused more on the model that they create and the insight that comes out of their model and how accurately their model depicts reality and so forth. But that's not enough. You have to bias your modeling and all the work that you do towards action. Otherwise, your return on investment is going to be very low. If you look at the technologies available today to handle analytics and decision making and decision support, there's a whole host of them. Gartner's got an analytic continuum that you see on the screen right now, which depicts all the various technologies that you can operate with. On the x-axis, you see the difficulty of some of these technologies and capabilities, and on the y-axis, you see value. Now, Gartner makes an assertion that most companies have gotten stuck in this first phase of descriptive analytics. This is your traditional BI. This is where you write reports, you build cubes, and do that type of stuff. Most companies never move beyond this stage. And Gartner insists that companies should probably move up the chain to this final zone called prescriptive analytics. And if you look at the technologies that are at play in this zone, it's rules engines, simulations, and predictive modeling. Interestingly enough, these are the key technologies that go into making a decision management system. And so the reason that you want to move from this early part of the cycle of descriptive analytics all the way to prescriptive analytics is not because it's interesting technology, but because there's a lot of business value. So let's talk about how that business value comes about. If you think about decisions that an enterprise makes, they broadly fall into 3 categories: strategic, tactical, and operational. Strategic decisions here are larger in size, indicating how important those strategic decisions are, and their economic impact here is on the high end of the spectrum. Tactical decisions, smaller in size, operational, much smaller. Let me play out this animation so you get a better sense of what I'm talking about. As this animation plays out, you can see you make a few strategic decisions, really important ones. You make a few more tactical decisions, but you make lots and lots of operational decisions, and these decisions add up. The economic value of each of them cumulatively is a lot. So it makes sense to spend a lot of energy in improving your operational decision making. And that's kind of the focus of decision management. Another way to look at the same concept, strategic decisions on the left here, tactical and operational decisions, they're kind of along a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, you have enterprise decision management, which helps with automated decision making. And at the other end, you have business intelligence. Most companies that I've worked with typically are using just business intelligence for a huge chunk of even their operational decision making. Now, these work obviously well together as well. Forrester had this to say about decision management. Decision management, possibly the last frontier in BI. So you can see it's kind of part of the same family of solution sets. It's just that most people haven't quite ventured into decision management like they have into BI. So to summarize this portion of my presentation about BI and decision management, everybody knows BI gives you information access. It synthesizes past performance. It also gives you some insight into the future. But remember, that's not enough. You need action, not just insight. An interesting example about this would be if somebody is trying to reduce weight, you could give him a weighing machine, a very precise weighing machine, which gives the individual exactly how much they weigh. It could even forecast next week how much their weight would be based on past trends. But is that enough for them to actually start reducing weight? Probably not. They need to actually make decisions to eat healthier and exercise and do all that kind of stuff. So the weighing machine here in this analogy is more like BI. It gives you the insight, but it's not yet action. And decision management is more focused on actually taking the action on your behalf, removing the human element out of it. So let's talk a little bit more about decision management. Here are the top key capabilities that a good decision management software should provide you. First and foremost, it automates decisions. So this is kind of like a business rules engine in many cases. Essentially, it is a rules engine which allows business users to dictate what they want to automate, and it allows you to reuse some of that decision logic across different applications. Another important thing that happens when you do decision management is decisions become transparent. You expose how decisions are made, and once you do that, you have all the knobs and dials to control your business. And when business users are in control of that interface, they can tweak things in a self-service way to navigate their business based on changing needs. Remember, in business, there's no static answers. Answers keep changing. You need to be agile about it. If your logic is embedded deep inside an application, your business is not agile. It's stuck in kind of the life cycle of that application. It's really hard to change course if your decision logic is embedded in various applications. Finally, a decision management solution should allow for simulation. This is kind of like if you're familiar with A/B testing. Well, that's one form of simulation. You're running data through various strategies and figuring out which one is appropriate. So decision management allows not just A/B testing. It's called champion challenger in the decision management world. But there's other forms of simulation that you can use to test out various rule sets and decision flows and so forth. And this allows you to experiment and learn before actually doing anything substantial. If you look at the types of decisions that are made in an enterprise, so there's broadly three categories, and this is from Tom Davenport's work. He says there's three types. There's automated decisions, there's automated with overrides, and there's assisted decisions where humans make the decisions. So if you the details here are not as important as the fact that decision management helps with the first two categories in totality. Automated decisions and automated with overrides can completely be handled by a good decision management system. The assisted part, that is human decision making. Decision management helps with that, so does BI, so does analytics, and a whole host of other technologies. Talking about human decision making, humans are actually prone to making great decisions when they're making very few decisions in a day. As the number of decisions you take in a day increases, the quality of decision making drops because of this idea of decision fatigue. This is why people like, even Steve Jobs and presidents of countries don't even bother spending time deciding what clothes they need to wear that day. They wear the exact same thing day in, day out, because they don't want to use up their precious little decision-making capabilities or energy in trivial decisions. So what happens if you're inundated with thousands and thousands of decisions? Well, your quality will go down. So it makes a lot of sense to automate these high-volume, repetitive decisions because of that human angle as well. Some of the sample use cases that come up when decision management solutions are talked about, the most common one is to determine if a customer is eligible for a benefit. Say you're applying for an insurance policy. These days you can get a response back in 5 minutes because that's a decision management solution behind the scenes, firing off certain rules and evaluating if you're eligible for insurance. Determine the next best offer from a marketing perspective. Validating the completeness of an invoice, calculating discounts for an order. The next one's interesting. Assessing which supplier is lowest risk. So the risk aspect of this is a pretty complicated subject. How do you calculate the risk? So a credit score is like a risk score, essentially. So there's an analytic component to this, and based on that risk score, your decision management solution can fire off a certain decision. You can use decision management for selecting terms of a loan, choosing which claims to fast track. Basically, if you think of marketing or supply chain or anything which has high volumes of decisions or high volumes of transactions involved, decision making can apply really effectively to those areas. The Fair Isaac company came up with a concept to measure decision making ROI. They called it decision yield. Essentially what decision yield does is it gives you 5 buckets within which to compare your decision making from what it is today and what it becomes after you get a decision management solution. And these 5 categories are precision of decision, consistency, agility, speed, and the cost of decision making. So you can do a quick before after. So before you have your decision management solution, this is the precision and the cost of making each of your operational decisions. And then you can do it after and therefore calculate the decision yield. I found that calculating ROI of BI projects tends to be hard because you have no idea if the human being involved is actually going to take the decisions that the insight provides to them. Whereas with decision management, you actually reduce that human element completely. And looking at these 5 key attributes, you can calculate those ROIs very effectively because the system is going to do all of the work for you. So now I want to provide you with 5 or 6 key questions that you should ask yourself to determine if decision management is applicable for your scenario. The first and obviously most important question is, are you dealing with a high volume of transactions? If you just have 10 customers and you're trying to figure out what to do with them, probably decision management doesn't make a lot of sense for you. But if you have any point of sale systems, for example, thousands of people making purchases every day from a retail storefront, well, that's a high volume of transactions. That kind of scenario is very applicable for decision management. Another question to ask yourself is how many rules and how complex are your rules? If your rules are really trivial, you probably don't need a decision management system. You can write those rules into a stored procedure or something else, or let your applications, which have some decision logic in them, run those decision-making cycles for you. But if your rules start to get complex, and people are typically surprised by how complex their decision-making tends to be once you do a good decision modeling exercise. So it's worth exploring this aspect of decision-making. How frequently do things change? If things don't change too much, you do not need a decision management system. However, that's rarely the case with most businesses. If things do change frequently, a decision management system will help you become much more agile and respond to those changes more frequently. Are there regulation and compliance issues? A decision management system can fully incorporate into the rules your historical data. It can incorporate regulation and compliance, and it can incorporate expert opinions and expertise that reside in the minds of people. So decision management broadly takes its input from three categories: regulation and compliance, your historical data in a data warehouse, and also human expertise. This is another very important question. Would business users benefit from being able to make these changes without getting into code? If you do not want any self-service for business users, you probably do not need a decision management system. Most business users would find this tremendously beneficial once they see the capabilities that that a set of technologies like decision management brings to the table. And finally, is this a one-time shot, or do you need to maintain those rules? If your rule-making is a one-shot effort, you do not need a decision management system. But if you want an easy way to maintain the decision logic across your enterprise, across all your applications, well, it's like creating a decision library. A decision management system is essentially a decision library where you have all the rules that are needed to execute on your business. That concludes a quick summary of what decision management is. I wanted to, this presentation, the primary goal was for you to get a launch pad to explore decision management and have a conversation around whether it makes sense for you to explore decision management for your business. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to guide you in this journey. And we also have a variety of offers available on our website around assessments or prototyping and actual implementation services if you want to implement a decision service in your environment. So feel free to contact us directly. Here's my contact information, and don't hesitate to reach out to us even if you think you're not sure whether decision management is right for you or not. Once again, thank you so much for your time.